I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. Mississippi voters reject the so-called personhood amendment. We'll have reaction and find out what comes next. Plus, voters in Arizona throw out a state lawmaker behind controversial anti-immigrant legislation.
If being recalled is the price for keeping one's promises, then so be it.
And taking care of business. Local entrepreneurs find out what it takes to make it in the business world.
Everything and anything can go wrong, and you have to be prepared for it. And most businesses will close within 5 years because they don't have the cash flow there in case something happens.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Yesterday was Election Day 2011, and even though it was an off-year election, voters went to the polls to decide some hot-button issues. Exhibit A, the Mississippi Personhood Amendment. Voters resoundingly rejected Amendment 26 yesterday. It would have defined as a person every human being from the moment of fertilization, cloning, or the functional equivalent thereof. The amendment failed 58% to 42%.
I think voters rejected a measure that they understood to be dangerous and that they understood to be bad for women and families in Mississippi.
We're not conceding because we did our duty. We have obeyed God. We have declared the truth. We have impacted our state.
Now, while that amendment did have a substantial amount of support, it also had plenty of opposition. As you saw there, pro-choice advocates saying the bill would have effectively banned most, if not all, abortions in Mississippi, while many pro-lifers expressed concerns about the amendment's potential unintended consequences. The Bishop of Biloxi said that his diocese was remaining neutral on the issue. And earlier this week, a representative from Personhood USA told me that his organization would try to get Mississippi state lawmakers to pass a personhood bill if the amendment were to fail, which of course it did, and we'll keep watching for any developments on that. Ohio voters, meanwhile, have rejected a measure that would have limited public workers' collective bargaining rights. That bill would have prohibited strikes along with promotions based only on seniority. Collective bargaining would have been limited to salaries, workplace conditions, and hours. Ohio Governor John Kasich, who backed the measure, conceded defeat.
It's clear that the people have spoken. And, my view is when people speak in a campaign like this, in a referendum, you have to listen when you're a public servant.
Ohioans did approve what is seen as a largely symbolic measure to exempt the state's residents from the requirement to purchase health insurance. That, of course, was part of the health care overhaul approved by Congress and signed by President Obama last year. Ohio's Catholic bishops remain neutral on both of those issues. And while voters were busy deciding those issues and more, the race for the 2012 GOP presidential nomination was busy heating up. But the big news lately has nothing to do with the candidates' policy positions. Former Godfather's Pizza CEO Herman Cain is defending himself against a growing number of accusations that he had sexually harassed women during his time as CEO of the National Restaurant Association. CNN's Jeannie Mose has more.
You know what they say.
It'll be he said, she said.
Even Herman Cain's accuser said her boyfriend said it.
He said it's going to be one of those he said, she said things.
It even applies in reverse to the anonymous accusers who got settlement money promising not to talk.
It's a classic case of he said, she's legally prohibited from saying.
The way the Daily Show put it,
the problem for Cain
is he said, she said, she said, she said, she said for the four accusers. But what is it they each said? Here we go. She said.
He suddenly reached over and he put his hand on my leg.
He said.
I don't even remember. I reject all of those charges.
She even said.
He also grabbed my head and brought it towards his crotch.
He even said.
I would first have to recognize who she is.
You don't remember having drinks with her back in '97? You don't remember
absolutely
giving her a
not.
ride in your car?
No, I reject all accusations. I don't remember that.
She said what?
I said, what are you doing? I have a boyfriend. This isn't what I came here for.
These accusations that were revealed yesterday
simply did not happen.
Mr. Kane said, "You want a job, right?" I asked him to stop, and he did.
There's not an ounce of truth in all of these accusations.
When she said what she said, she often used his first name.
Unfortunately for Herman, he's still in denial.
While he said he didn't even remember her name.
I don't even know who this woman is.
Amid all this he said, she said, might as well get fed. The website BuzzFeed concocted a parody Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor, harassment chocolate chip. Remember, this is fake, so don't ask for it at the store. Mint ice cream with fondled fudge chunks and assaulted peanuts. Back to the he said, she said, but what has his wife said?
And my wife said to me when I said, "Hello, sweetheart, did you see it?" She said, "Yes." I said, "What'd you think?" She said, "I've known you for over 40 years. That stuff doesn't even sound like you."
I know what happened, and he knows what happened.
Which makes this a he knows, she knows.
Will be an interesting race. That report, of course, from CNN's Jeannie Mose. Well, there's more currents ahead, along with more election results from yesterday's voters taking to the polls. An upstate New York town clerk who's taken a pass on issuing marriage licenses. Well, she was up for re-election. We'll have the results there and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, a local parish fosters an entrepreneurial spirit. First, though, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, it may not have been the biggest race in terms of numbers, but political observers here in New York were certainly keeping an eye on it. An upstate New York town clerk who refused to issue marriage licenses over her opposition to same-sex marriage was re-elected to another two-year term. Rosemarie Belforti made headlines over the summer by announcing that a deputy in her office would issue marriage licenses by appointment. Now, that was a move designed to avoid Belforti having to issue the licenses to same-sex couples. Belforti says she opposes same-sex marriage because of her religious beliefs. A same-sex couple is suing Belforti over that policy. Well, meantime, a new Gallup poll shows the Catholic presence in the country's two major political parties is on the decline. The survey shows Catholics currently make up 22% of the Republican Party, down from 23% in 2008. Meanwhile, Catholics are 24% of the Democratic Party. That's a drop of 2 percentage points from 2008. Gallup's results show Republicans are more likely to go to church than are Democrats. Well, turning to Egypt, where a spokesman for the Catholic Church there says the government is whitewashing an incident in which 28 Christians were killed. In a story first reported on the website Asian News, Egypt's National Council for Human Rights says unidentified outside groups fired on Coptic Christians during protests on October 9th. A spokesman for the Catholic Church in Egypt says the council is attributing the attack to outside groups in order to whitewash the military. Now, the official report makes no mention of the protesters who were run over by military tanks. Back in this country, the U.S. Bishops' Conference has filed a Freedom of Information Act request over a decision to cut government grants to a bishop's anti-human trafficking program. Now, according to Bishops' Conference spokesperson Sister Marianne Walsh, the Department of Health and Human Services denied funding to the Bishops' Conference's migration and refugee services, while two organizations that, quote, didn't make the cutoff were awarded grants. Walsh believes that the decision was politically motivated because the Bishops' Conference does not refer people for abortions or contraceptives. Well, meanwhile, a former Health and Human Services Secretary is calling on President Obama to create a commission on adult stem cell research. Tommy Thompson tells EWTN News that he wants a body created within the National Institutes of Health to bring together the adult stem cell research that is currently ongoing in the U.S. Now, Thompson is in Rome for a 3-day conference organized by the Pontifical Council for Culture and the U.S.-based STEM for Life Foundation, both of which promote adult stem cell research. A nun here in New York says childhood demons caused the gambling addiction that led her to embezzle more than $850,000 from the college where she worked. Sister Marie Thornton was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay back less than half of the money that she stole from Iona College in Westchester County. Thornton worked at the school as a vice president of finance. She apologized for hurting so many people, she said, and also for embarrassing her religious community, family, and friends. A defense attorney says Thornton has been diagnosed with a pathological gambling addiction. And just a day after the White House first announced it, the administration says it's putting the kibosh on a proposed 15-cent tax on Christmas trees. A White House spokesman told Fox News that under the proposal, producers and importers of Christmas trees would have been taxed, with the money being used for a promotional campaign for fresh-cut Christmas trees. The spokesman says Christmas tree growers supported that tax. At least one critic says the fee would have likely been passed on to consumers. Well, stay with us. There's much more currents ahead. Coming up, the man behind Arizona's SB 1070 gets the boot. We'll look at why voters tossed out a veteran lawmaker.
I've always kept my promises.
Welcome back. In this off-year election, when Mississippi's personhood amendment and a measure to limit collective bargaining by public workers in Ohio got most of the attention, immigration was also at the center of the vote in one state. Arizona State Senator Russell Pierce, a lead sponsor of the state's controversial immigration bill, that's a measure that the U.S. Bishops' Conference called draconian, faced off with a fellow Republican in a recall election. CNN's Thelma Gutierrez caught up with both candidates in what was a highly charged race before the votes were cast.
So do you know what the numbers are?
Once you get there, you'll turn south.
It's one of the most contentious state legislative races in Arizona history.
By electing Jerry Lewis.
Republican versus Republican, a recall election in the most conservative district in the state, just outside of Phoenix.
I don't know if you want to start over here.
The incumbent, president of the Arizona State Senate, Russell Pierce.
What do we do?
The self-proclaimed father of the anti-illegal immigration movement, who has pushed some of the toughest immigration laws Arizonans and the nation have seen. The challenger, Jerry Lewis, a longtime businessman and educator in Mesa, Arizona. And it gets more interesting.
How you doing today?
Both candidates say they're fiscal conservatives and both are members of the Mormon Church. But there's a major difference. Immigration.
Politicians who continue to talk tough but never do anything. Arizona, we're going to do something.
I'm all for securing the borders. I'm all for the rule of law. We need to do it in a humane way.
Lewis, a leader in the LDS Church, says he doesn't believe in mass deportations or separating families. He says Pierce's tough anti-illegal immigrant policies don't line up with the teachings of their faith.
I'm a newcomer, and honestly, I had no political ambitions before I was asked by some good Republican friends of mine to do this, but I felt for a long time that we needed better representation of our city, our state, and our party.
But Republicans in the district are split between the candidates. Polls show they're in a dead heat.
Latinos are being asked to support another Republican in order to recall Senator Russell Pierce. I think what's going to tip the scale is going to be the Latino vote.
Latino voters and Democrats who could turn out for a Republican. Not a common practice in these parts, but that's how close it is.
Hey, I'm Senator Russell Pierce. And you probably know this guy, Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Senator Pierce says with Sheriff Joe Arpaio campaigning by his side, he's on the right side of the law. The Lewis camp says their candidate just wants to move toward the center.
CNN's Thelma Gutierrez reporting there. And in what was a first for an Arizona legislator, Russell Pierce lost that recall election. Pierce conceded defeat at the hands of challenger Jerry Lewis. Pierce defending his record, though, telling supporters that he did what he felt was best for the state of Arizona.
If being recalled is the price for keeping one's promises, then so be it. I've always kept my promises. I've always put my loyalty to this republic, the rule of law, and the moral principles that folks have died for from the beginning of this great republic ahead of any personal interest. I will continue to do that. I will always keep my promises. I will always keep my oath of office. I will always defend this republic and the rule of law.
Now, the challenger, Jerry Lewis, will serve the remaining year of Pierce's 2-year term. Stay with us. There's more currents ahead. When we return, budding entrepreneurs get some tips on making their businesses grow.
But a lot of people want to be their own bosses and want to work on their own rather than being in a corporate pecking order where you're always subject to somebody above you whim or orders.
Finally tonight, we've been talking a lot about elections and votes on hot button issues like immigration and abortion, but many political observers say next year's election might just come down to jobs, jobs, jobs. Well, we found out that even in this tough economy, there are a lot of people out there who are ready to get out of the rat race, be their own boss, and maybe provide some jobs for people in their community in the process. Back in 2006, St. Anselm's Parish in Bay Ridge started a workforce ministry. Now, the group initially helped people with resumes and gave tips on finding a job. Well, now 5 years later, the ministry has definitely grown, and last week, it was a record turnout as the group hosted a panel discussion with local business owners. And as we discovered, plenty of men and women have that entrepreneurial spirit.
Just by a show of hands, how many of you already own a business? Okay. How many of you are thinking of starting a business? Wow, lots of folks.
But a lot of people want to be their own bosses and want to work on their own, set their own terms, get a lot more fulfillment out of it rather than being in a corporate pecking order where you're always subject to somebody above you whim or orders.
We do evaluations and we ask our community more of what they would like us to bring in terms of information. And the last time around, they said they'd like to know a little bit about entrepreneurship. We asked the entrepreneurs in our community if they would come in and share their journey, their challenges.
Now there's a large segment of the population that are not going to go back to work in the normal quote-unquote type of business, large company. So the small business will eventually grow, and hopefully we can help them.
And our experience is that the businesses that are small enough and that are nimble enough to react to the market conditions, whether it be shrinking or growing, because growing can be just as much of a problem.
I think people have looked in the mirror and looked at what can I do with the two hands that I have and the head that's on my shoulder. Do I have some skill? Do I have some love or avocation that I like to do? And can I create a business out of it? And so we're seeing more and more of that. I think that's what you see with the folks that were here tonight.
Whatever your business is going to be, whether it's manufacturing small products for local businesses and getting larger, or providing a service and selling books and giving massages and therapy, or just selling some good meals and some good drink. Stick with your business plan. Let it work itself out.
First piece of advice, double your budget. Double your budget, because the second piece of advice is that everything and anything can go wrong and you have to be prepared for it, and most businesses will close within 5 years because they don't have the cash flow there in case something happens.
Well, she's actually looking at starting a skincare business, and I have an economics background, so I kind of wanted to help her.
There's a lot of things that I learned, and I guess one thing that sticks out in my mind is really how to relate to the customer and do my research, like market research.
I think the key takeaway is that the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and kicking, and people want to know how they could take their creative abilities and turn it into a job where they can showcase their passion.
We had a record level of attendance here this evening. So apparently we're hitting their needs. And I said we're guided by the evaluations. It's all about a call to service. We come to serve, to build, and to help people during these very, very difficult times. And it's a privilege to have this opportunity.
It's almost like, to sum up there, plan, 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 and when you think you're through planning, plan some more, all right? Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, he's a priest who was not allowed to preach sermons or hear confessions, yet people lined up to meet with him. The tablet hosts a forum on Father Solanus Casey. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We're also on Facebook and we're on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.